Welcome to Women Speakers Association's WSA TV. I'm Laura Rubinstein, your host and producer of our women's premiere show. And as you can see today, we're talking about elevating your skills. How are your skills in business? How are your skills as a caregiver? I've got two experts here chomping at the bit, ready to share with you their wisdom to help you sharpen the saw. So let's go and say hello to them right now. And we'll say hi to Allison.
Hi, Laura. My name is Allison K. I'm a global business leader, author, speaker, and a podcaster. And I can be found at AllisonKSummers.com. And I'm speaking to you today from windy Chicago.
Well, welcome from windy Chicago. We're happy to have you, Allison. And let's say hi to Laura. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Laura. Hi, Allison. My name is Laura Wayman. I'm an internationally renowned dementia care expert speaking to you from Roseville, California. And you can find me online at laurawayman.com.
Now, something all of us, three of us, have in common is that we are all authors in the Voices of the 21st Century book that came out last year. We have another book coming out this year, but I thought it would be great if we could, share our expertise today to help sharpen the saw. So I wanted to ask Allison first, what advice do you have for business leaders about how they can elevate their skills?
So one of the things I talk about, Laura, is how to be seen as a business partner of choice. And I talk a lot about building your connections, your relationships, and your business acumen, and being a futurist. But it's really about being seen as a content expert and building content. So that's why I started podcasting, to help other people build content, build my own content. So I'll share that as a tip to get us started.
Yeah. Do you have any other tips that would help people really hone their skill in that area with content?
I think you have to consume the content first, and then look for people that are speaking in the space that you're in to understand the rhythm and what they're speaking about, and then find that gap where you can build your authority and be your expert. And because I speak to a lot of people who are coming up in business, whether they're CEOs down to people who are trying to grow their careers, a real fundamental tip I tell people, and it sounds crazy, is go to the used bookstore, find a big fat management book, and look at the table of contents and start either thinking what in it you can speak on to build your authority, or what is it that you need to get more information on to fill your skills gap. And I know it sounds so fundamental, but it makes sense, and it helps be this kind of guidepost for people.
And so when they get this book, and they see these areas that they may have some gaps in, what would you say the next step would be?
So I talk about filling that skills gap, and you can fill your skills gap two different ways. Either you can self-study and build your knowledge, or this goes back to your network. And so I wrote a book called Connect to Influence, and it's how to build your network with an executive mindset. And so I say, for example, if your blind spot or skills gap is in social media marketing, then find somebody that you really like and jive with that can be part of your personal group that can help you or give you information and advice when you need it. So you can either build the expertise on your own or connect with people to fill that skills gap for you.
Yeah, it sounds like being curious about what really resonates for you to grow in, and or that if you have a gap, to fill it in. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And today more than ever, we're being challenged to be more well-rounded, because in this kind of future of work, I tell people, you're a gig worker, you just don't know it already. So no matter what level you're at, we're already in this new age where we have to think of ourselves as solopreneurs or entrepreneurs, or if we want to start our own business. I always say, if you wanted to start your own business, who would be your first customer? So you have to be conscious of the things that you don't know, and you can be a deep dive expert, but you still have to look across the horizon and cover those gaps.
Yeah, because you'll make better decisions that way when you know more about the broad, big picture. Thank you. That's really invaluable advice today in today's environment. If you're so used to working in your little one way, we really do need to broaden our scope. And if
Mhm.
it's just with these little nuggets you've just added, thank you so much for that. And I wanted to go over to Laura. Laura, you work with caregivers. So tell us, people are really challenged today with caregiving because we now have to deal with a virus and extra precautions. And now you specifically work with dementia patients. So what advice do you have for people to elevate their caregiving skills?
Well, I'd like to really resonate with Allison in the fact that I actually am not limited to just working with caregivers, because what I've had to learn is identifying the need globally. Dementia is this huge, giant, silent pandemic, and we are working, yes, with the coronavirus pandemic, but now I'm working with people that have been isolated and working with loved ones or residents or clients that have had this other kind of challenge in dementia. And as dementia cases increase locally, nationwide, it is really promoting this idea that we all need to understand dementia and throughout the general population. It's not just caregivers who need to be what I call dementia aware. It's our local firefighters, it's our law enforcement, it's everyone in the community that can help support these indeed specific caregivers, such as those caregivers in assisted living, those caregivers in skilled nursing, those family caregivers at home caring for a loved one with dementia. When you reach the age of 70, you have a 50% chance of having some cause of dementia. So it is touching everyone. And unfortunately, I ask this question, are you dementia aware, and are you sure you're dementia aware? Because we as a society, as the world, we know a little bit about dementia, but we don't know near enough to provide the type of support, communication strategies, just total care strategies to really help everyone who, if you're not being touched by dementia yet, you will be. And so it's everyone needs to learn this.
Yeah, and tell me, what is the one or two things when you say be dementia aware, and I might not be aware of, that could make a difference in how I interact with, I help, and I support this community?
Well, to be dementia aware is to understand these conditions are very different for every single person because there's so many causes, and that dementia is not a disease or an illness. Dementia is not a diagnosis. Dementia is a collection of symptoms. And it's much more than memory loss. So we've kind of stopped our education often just speaking about memory loss. It's thousands of dementia symptoms often go unrecognized and unmanaged because we don't have this dementia awareness, this realization about what dementia actually is, how it affects that person, and how we can better communicate and connect in order to manage it.
So how would we? How can we connect, and how can we better manage it? Well, where would we start as someone just learning that, oh my gosh, dementia is way more than what we're thinking?
Well, dementia actually is showing us that there's loss of normal brain function, and we have to utilize brain function to understand the world around us. What we hear, what we see, we have to process all of that information. And that is exactly what someone with dementia begins to lose. So we have to learn that essentially, and the easiest way for me to tell you this is that someone who's exhibiting these dementia symptoms has a broken thinker. So anytime we make them think, we make them anxious. And so it's best if we learn to think for them. And the way that we do that is to not ask questions, not make them think about an answer, not give options. And there's several different ways that we have to learn to do this. However, this is a complete change in how we communicate with adults with a healthy mind. So it takes practice and practicing these new strategies and allowing us to recognize these unrecognized dementia symptoms and help to think for them in all these different areas.
That's a whole new paradigm of
It is.
interacting. Could you give us a little a vignette, a story of like how one would think for someone?
Well, sure. If let's just say that your loved one, I'm a spouse, my husband is showing some of these dementia symptoms, and he's having a very difficult time processing what he normally would be able to process and think about in the past. So, for example, I am caring for him, and I say to him, "Would you like to go to dinner tonight? Are you hungry?" Well, immediately that makes him have to think of a response. He has to not only understand the question, he has to think of a response. So, most of the time, what will happen is that he will be resistant and he'll say, "No, I'm not hungry. No, I don't want to," because it just overwhelms him trying to think about that answer. And instead, it's so much more successful if I were to use what I call a positive action statement. And instead of making him think, simply think for him. "I bet you're hungry. I love it when we go to dinner together. Let's go." And then that way, you are gently guiding him to a place where he feels loved, safe, secure, and valued. He's not worried about answering. He doesn't have to think. It just helps him to get it done.
And yeah, it's a little bit more work for the caregiver, for the spouse, but it's also going to provide what I'm getting is a more positive interaction where they're being reinforced of the value they are, and they're not being, like you said, asked to strain their capacities, right, at the moment.
Exactly. And it's also understanding that what does remain, what they never lose, is their basic feelings and emotions. So it's talking to those feelings, supporting those feelings. Instead of asking them to do that, we just simply do it for them. And it gives them those feelings that we all want, that love, safety, security, and value, instead of feeling anxious, instead of feeling overwhelmed, instead of basically feeling inadequate. It gives them the opportunity to be successful in every single situation.
Yeah. I love the advice that both of you have given, one to sharpen the saw in business and one to sharpen the saw in the personal. And they're both um, really can be challenging, and they can both be exciting at the same time because you're learning how to enhance relationships with people and also grow your abilities. So while you have those abilities, that's so important. So now I want to know a little bit more about you and your expertise. So Allison, I thought you could share first and share us about, what are you passionate about? Who do you work with and what do you do for them?
Thanks, Laura. And I want to go to our other Laura. And I think why I do what I do and why I've become so passionate as at this stage in my professional life is because of stories like what Laura's telling, right? You never know what's going to happen in your life if you're going to be in that position of being a caregiver, or you're going to have, just something in your family. And so I talk about being a business partner of choice and about the economy of you. And I got into this because I've worked in business for all these years. I've worked heels on the ground in over 30 countries. And one day I was asked by a friend who was a director in a new job and getting a lot of flack from the CFO of the organization. And she asked me to help with her financial statements. And I sat down and I looked at everything and I started telling the story of her company and started telling her the story of what was going on and why people were asking questions. And she was quite amazed. And for me, it was an easy thing. And it was just that piece of I can do a lot more for other people, sharing wisdom and knowledge. And I tend to work with individuals, not with companies. And my goal is to get their business story out and to help them craft a better business story. And so, that's why I'm passionate about what I do. And so some of the people I work with are trying to scale up in their careers, and some people are CEOs that are already frazzled and need some help, and I'll do a CEO for a day program where we'll go in on a weekend and really do a debrief of what the situation is, and help get some structure in place, or help rejuvenate where it is that they're stuck. So I really enjoy doing those things for people very, very much, because you don't know, as the stories that Laura told, if you don't elevate your skills and stay sharp and worry about your economic health, how are you going to take care of your loved ones when you have situations come up?
Yeah, great point. And so I want to know, how did you come to this work?
We all have a passion point where we say, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to do something. But for me, I had two things happening in my sphere. I had my professionals that I knew that were advanced in their careers, who had done nothing to stay current, lose a job or be outsourced and be clueless as to what they needed to do. And on the other end, I had a daughter graduate from college, and realizing how much that college doesn't prepare them for business or for the workplace. So I started writing more, started speaking, started sharing, different pieces on what people can do to protect their economic health. And so for me, it was just natural to do these things. And 2 years ago, I started a podcast, Disruptive CEO Nation, and it looks for company founders from around the world to tell their business story. And some of the founders are in the early stages of their startup, and some are 20, 30 years down the line in their story. And it just brings me even more rich content to share with others. And so that's some of how I got to where I'm at and some of what I do.
It's beautiful to see the evolution and the gifts that you help people bring out and can continue to grow in their lives. So, thank you for helping to elevate the skills of the people you're working with, because they're going out and making a bigger impact in the
Yeah.
world. It's a beautiful thing. So, Laura, I'd like to ask you now. You take care of, you help this whole population, the 50% of over 70-year-olds who have dementia. Tell us about who do you like, a little bit more about who you work with, how you work with them, why you're so passionate about this.
Sure. Well, I work with, like I said, with many different people. I work with caregivers who actually are caring for a loved one who has some symptoms of dementia in varying levels. Maybe they're caring for them at home. I work with in-home care companies, assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing, helping them to provide a higher standard of care and learning these different skills that will indeed raise that standard. I help with the medical community, because not all of the medical community is very dementia aware as well. They have a clinical knowledge, but they don't have the knowledge of how to support this socially, emotionally, and how to give the kind of support that is needed for these caregivers. This is so hard on these caregivers. It is such a shocking statistic that 68% of the time, if that caregiver is the same age spouse and they are the primary caregiver, 68% of the time, over half the time, they get sick and go first before that person who has the dementia symptoms, simply because it is so stressful and demanding on them to constantly have to think for that person who is slowly losing and declining, and that broken thinker is getting worse.
Wow, that who would have thought, right? This is really, you're bringing to light such an important area. Do you have a story about how you help someone in this area?
Yes, I'd love to share a story. So let me share the story of Peggy. Peggy was a wonderful mother of five, a grandmother, and a wonderful wife to her husband, Jack. And over the years, Peggy and Jack, they planned for their retirement. They had decided that they would sell their home and buy a RV and live the carefree life, which they did. And they traveled around the United States visiting their relatives and that were scattered all over, and they were square dancers, so they square danced all throughout their retirement. They lived that life for 15 years. But then Peggy began to sense a change because Jack began to show signs and symptoms of dementia and he began to decline. So Peggy made that decision as the caregiver to sell their RV, and they found a wonderful little home, and she stepped back into that role of being a full-time caregiver, kind of giving up on that retirement lifestyle because the health situation had changed. And they lived that life for 3 years as she was continually supporting his decline. But she began to have conversations with her children and her friends about how difficult it was to manage these symptoms as he got worse and worse. And they could hear what a stressful job it was. Even her daughter offered to help her, and Peggy insisted no, she was okay, even though she sounded exhausted and she was struggling. But several weeks after she began to really show this exhaustion and have these conversations with her family, Jack and Peggy sat down to dinner one night. They were home alone, and Peggy suffered a massive heart attack. Now, Jack's dementia was so far advanced, he didn't recognize she needed emergency help. So by the time anyone in the neighborhood even realized there was a problem, it was too late. Peggy was already gone. Peggy was my mother. That's how I learned how serious this was. She was this champion, this hero, this wonderful caregiver who was throwing her entire life into taking care of Jack as he continued to decline and really refusing help because she believed she could do it on her own. But it was so stressful, it took her down first. So I recognized we must become a dementia-aware safety net. Our communities, our medical communities, the entire world, so that we can provide the type of support that will save these caregivers' lives by helping them and recognizing they can't do it alone.
Yeah. Wow, powerful story. Wasn't expecting the twist at the end there with you as the as this was your stories, your family's story, and why you're so passionate about helping the people involved in the dementia community, anybody who has dementia or deals with people with dementia, elevate their skills. So between Allison, what you do with executives, helping them plan for the long term, helping them live the most effective life now with their businesses and their work careers, and Laura helping for the long term, the elevating the skills is essential. So this is what we do here at Women Speakers Association. We help you elevate your skills. We help you get your message out so that you can not have what happened to Laura, so that if you were more dementia aware at the time, Laura, you might have been able to have a different impact and outcome. And so sorry for your loss in that sense. So I thought I'd ask each of you about what is the value that Women Speakers Association has brought to you by being involved, and why would you recommend somebody else get involved? Allison, do you want to answer that first?
I'm happy to answer it, Laura. I think, on the surface, Women's Speakers Association, people join because they think, oh, this is going to help me be a speaker, help me get on platforms, help me hone my craft. For me, when I kind of came full on in, it was because I wanted to connect with other people. As I said, I'm a glutton for a good business story. I love just hearing everybody's human experiences. And I really wanted to build my personal network of people like yourself that I could call on for advice or for information or be a resource to them. So for me, the benefit of Women Speakers Association was the members. I mean, I love what the office does and all of the great trainings, because there's just constant information that's flowing. But I love the community aspect of it.
Beautiful. It is a community, and we have tons of resources. Just yesterday, we had Melanie Benson teaching about podcasting, growing your podcast guesting ability, being a guest on podcasts. That training is available for free for our members, our premier members, and it's available 24/7 access afterwards. So you're so right. But the community, the sisterhood, the connections, the resources that we all have with our own expertise. I mean, you just met Laura here, who has a whole nother area of expertise, right? And now you have another resource in your community. So Laura, I'd love to hear from you. What is the value that Women Speakers Association has been for you as well?
Well, once again, it's all of the members and the opportunity to connect. And I feel like as a dementia expert, I learn something new every day and become more and more aware. But today, this show is helping me to be more aware of how to share my message and learn from others about their message so that we can integrate this. It's so necessary that we support each other as well. And I it's amazing to me, just learning from experts like you, Laura, experts like you, Allison, about how do I take this very important, vital message, and how do I learn to share it in a better way, and how can I help you do the same?
Unmute.
And so it's not just about taking, it's about giving and receiving, right? And in this community, we really done that quite effectively. And we have a whole sisterhood for you here to do that. So thank you both for your wisdom, for sharing so generously, for doing what you do in your work. And we are here to help get the message out. So please be in touch. If you're watching today with Allison, with Laura, you'll see their this information. It's here on Facebook, it's here on YouTube, and it's also at WSATV.com. And if you want to be a part of the community too, check us out at joinwsa.com. So we'll be back with another episode. Oh, we have a very special episode next week. We're sharing valuable resources from our community to help you through this time of social distancing and quarantining and everything. You know, there's so many resources you're going to get. It's going to be amazing. So we'll see you next week. Thank you again, Allison and Laura. Bye.
Oh, thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Allison.